Anecdotes for success. Level up with truth, meaning, trade-offs, perspective.
All right, we have Matthew Hogan on tonight. He's part of my relationship network through Twitter. I was telling Matthew earlier, Matt, our co-host, always finds it so intriguing how you can just reach out to literally anyone in the world and bring them into a classroom or a podcast or even build a relationship further than that. So, Matthew, welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you start? I don't want to tell the audience too much. Why don't you go back? Why don't you give us a background of what you're currently doing? Then we'll dig from there. How's that?
Absolutely. Sounds great. So currently, I'm a full-time martial art instructor. And interestingly enough, this is the only job I've ever had full-time. So when I was 11, I grew up. So in my childhood, I grew up in a neighborhood where, kids were always outside playing. And so I grew up playing football in the streets, basketball in driveways. I used to wrestle on lawns, and I used to go home when the streetlights came on. That was my upbringing pretty much every night. I would get out of school, go outside, and I wouldn't go home until the streetlights came on, went to bed, woke up, did it again. My big role models when I was coming up were the Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles and WWF wrestlers before it turned into WWE. So you kind of get the idea of kind of my upbringing. That gives you a little gist. And then when I was 11, the neighborhood that I grew up in started getting bad. There was, some gang violence and there was some shootings around the neighborhood from where I lived. And so my parents decided to move to a new neighborhood for safety reasons. And so I was fortunate enough to have been able to do that. And we moved into literally the exact kind of opposite situation. We moved into a neighborhood that was in a suburb away from where I lived. And it was like a retirement neighborhood. So you can imagine there was just pretty much, the streets were quiet. Wasn't a lot going on. There weren't really any kids playing outside that I could just go and try to wing it with. And so it was a very, very drastic shift in my life, right? And so what that led to at 11 years old was, for the first time in my life, I started playing video games. And that wasn't something that was even on my mind when I was a kid coming up, which is amazing because you can't get it off kids' minds in today's world. But I didn't even have any interest in it growing up until then. And so I started, I think my first system I ever got was a PlayStation, and being a 90s kid, that's like, beyond people. So anyways, I got a PlayStation and I started playing all the time. I have a very, kind of focused and deliberate type of mentality. And so once I get into something, I'm like all in. And so I played all in on video games for the entire duration of that summer. So it was a couple months. Finally went back to school, 5th grade. Got to meet a couple kids, started kind of building a relationship up and kind of like started getting back into that activity and that flow kind of grind. And then what happened was, because I shifted my lifestyle to so much inactivity, I ended up gaining a bunch of weight, and I was real skinny and active as a kid. But then all of a sudden, at 11 years old, right as I'm coming into these preteen teen years, where I'm forming the foundation of my identity, figuring out who I want to be and how I want to stand out or fit in or whatever, I started to gain weight and become really self-conscious, and it took a drastic turn. So nonetheless, this is where martial art comes in the picture. And so back to where I began the story, 11 years old, driving down the street one day with my mom, I saw this picture of a kicking guy on a building that just recently opened. And I asked mom, was like, hey, what is that? Can we do that? Can I go try that? And so she agreed, took me over to the martial arts school. And, she was a little hesitant at first. She was kind of like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of nervous. Are you going to have to like fight people? Like and so I had to tell her, like, no, just let me try it. So she finally, relented and brought me to the school. And it was just, when I walked into that school, what I saw was like the epitome of like who I wanted to become. I saw like these real strong and enthusiastic and just dynamic martial art instructors who were speaking with conviction and doing all these cool moves. And they were, just kind of like what I wanted to become in this very sensitive time in my life when I was going through this kind of, identity phase. And so long story short, at 11 years old, I started training. I was so excited to start. I remember the date of my first class. That was April 11th of 2001. Almost, I just passed my anniversary. I'm just realizing right now it's April 13th. So April 11th, 2001 was when I first started. And so I started going in 2 times a week and then 3 times a week. And then I started training 4, 5, 6 days a week. And then I was there early and I stayed late. And then I started helping other classes. And then I started building a mentorship with one of the main instructors there. So I would come in early and he would teach me extra stuff. And that kind of like, I started building the skill set that was so niche and unique that by the time I turned 14, I was starting to get paid under the table, right? I was starting to get allowances to just show up and help out and just, participate in these classes. And that kind of laddered. And then one thing led to another thing. And, then all of a sudden I was hired at, I think back in the day, 16 was the minimum age for getting hired. So I got, hired at 16, I think it was. And then, an instructor would leave or an instructor had another obligation come up. And so I stepped up and filled that plate. And that just continued all the way up until today, where I'm now running the school that I took my first martial art class in. And so this goes back, I started working there 2004, like June of 2004, that summer. And here we are, 23, almost 19 years later. And so that's essentially where I am. And then on the side, kind of corresponding to how me and Mr. Richmond met, I do writing on the side. And that's been a really great compliment to the martial art training, because the cool thing about martial arts is it's very much focused on not just strong body, but strong mind and strong spirit. So it's got that holistic approach to becoming stronger as an individual. And so I became very interested early on in personal development, self-improvement, mindset practices, anything I could do to just develop myself to become a stronger individual, a stronger leader for the kids I was teaching, and, just a stronger martial artist in general. And so that continued. And then, I started a website right out of college, right when I was graduating. This is probably 2010. I started a website where I was pretty much capturing, indexing, organizing quotes from books I was reading and from just internet sources. And so I would take a quote.
What's the site again? What's the name of the site again?
Yeah, sure. It's movemequotes.com. That's MOVE, move me, M-E, and then quotes, QUOTES.com. So I started that in 2010, started uploading quotes to it. And then I started uploading book excerpts, and then I started uploading and creating quote lists. And then it started doing really, really well. It started ranking really high on Google, and I had a really great turnout of people. And so that kind of progressed into something that was cool. And then, again, just kind of fast forwarding here for some highlights. And then I finally decided I was going to start writing my own words, because I had spent so much time capturing other people's words that I finally was like starting to form my own opinions, which I didn't have. I didn't feel confident enough, right? When I thought about writing before, it was always something that was hard for me to do. I struggled with writing in school. I struggled with starting. I struggled with like putting the words on the paper. But eventually, after reading enough from other people and after making enough connections and starting to like kind of talk about all these concepts that I had learned so much about, I eventually hit a tipping point where I had a moment, and I can dive deeper into that moment if you want, but I'm trying to be concise here. So I had a moment where I kind of shifted away from like being super self-conscious, and I realized kind of like what was triggering the imposter syndrome. And then I shifted into this like new mindset and started to just write a little bit. And I was kind of on and off for a couple of years writing. I was experimenting with articles and just trying to figure out like where I kind of landed with my own voice. And then again, fast forward to January 1st of 2020. This was a kind of like a New Year's wave kind of vibe. But on January 1st, 2020, I just felt this like, I kind of felt that tipping point hit. And then the new year was just like that last little kick I needed. And I started writing daily. I decided I wasn't going to make any fancy announcements. I wasn't going to promise myself anything crazy. And I wasn't going to like try to make it into this elaborate thing. All I did was I took a quote that I had indexed on Move Me Quotes, and then I just commented on it, like my own thoughts or a related experience. And with that, I just posted it at the time on Facebook. And at the bottom, I just put 1 out of 365. That's all I did. There was no announcement. There was no like, I'm going to start writing daily and make this into a thing. it was just 1 out of 365, and it was just for me. And then I did it again the next day, and I did it again the next day, and it turned into a habit, and it's a habit that I'm still doing today. And so I don't know what number I'm on now, but I think closing in on 1,500 or something like that, daily kind of written pieces that I've had. And I've been curating that on my own blog and then starting to put them in. And the project right now, so I'm where I'm landed to answer your question, full-time martial art instructor, still doing that. It's definitely one of my passions because moving and interacting with people and being in a brick and mortar is so key. As you know, Coach Richmond, nothing replaces the classroom, right? Yep. Even, especially when you have like the Zoom and the virtual stuff, like it's a Band-Aid, but it's not the same. And so there's nothing that really replaces that for me. But then, in my downtime, I really enjoy the inner work of being able to just look inward and read other people's stuff, think about what I think about those things. And I come up with, now it's just a short 1 minute written piece. 1 minute comes from my constraint, which is 280 words. I don't do any more than 280 words. And I publish a 280 word or less mini essay every day, and it gets sent out to people and they read it every morning if they want. But it's just an inner work piece, whether that's a personal reflective kind of inner work musing or something that might inspire other people to look inward as well. Because, fundamentally speaking, I think that that's the real true component of, finding the things you're looking for in life has a lot to do with in here and not so much to do with out there. And so that's kind of my days. My days are composed of a good chunk of inner work and writing and reading and kind of sharing and connecting. And then an evening chunk where my teaching starts after school. So when you finish, the kids come to me because they're off school now. And so I teach 3:30 to 9:30 every night. And then I do Saturday mornings. And then those are all the martial art classes all the way from 3. We have a 3 to 6-year-old program, a 7 to 12-year-old program, 13 to 17, and then we have 18 and up. And we go all the way up to 70 years old. So I've had the privilege of working with all walks of life, blah, blah. So there's a little bit of a gist as far as what I do and where I'm at. I hope I didn't take too long. I was trying to be concise.
No, I'll let you start, Matt. I know you've got one stewing in there.
No, I thanks for sharing. And you'd mentioned though at one point that there was a moment or something that happened and it kind of kept going there. But can you tell us about that? What that was, what that meant, why it was important?
Yeah, for sure. That was a big one. So it has to do with imposter syndrome. I definitely was facing a lot of moments where I would sit down to write and I would think to myself, because here's the thing, when you spend all your time uploading motivational quotes and resources from the best on the planet, and the best, not even like alive, but dead, like the people from all time, like you can't help but like think to yourself, who the hell am I? Like, what am I going to say compared to Martin Luther King or Tony Robbins or Oprah or Osho? Like, so that was what I battled for so long. And that's what took me so long to, kind of feel like I had anything worthwhile to say. That was the block. And so overcoming that, what it looked like was, I kind of had a moment where it was inspired in part by Seth Godin. All right. And so he's been a big contributor for me, a big inspiration for me. But one of the things that I remember Seth talking about was that you have to find ways that you can contribute, like, right, ways that you can contribute in your own unique way and in a way that is not based on your comparison to other people. And the way he framed it was, you have to look at what you're doing as giving gifts into the world. And that's when it clicked for me, because now instead of me trying to write something better than, or like, who am I in comparison to them, and, trying to make myself more worthy than some of the greatest writers of all time. Now, all of a sudden, when Seth was talking about it being a gift, now it's like, oh, what I'm doing is I'm not trying to be the best writer of the world. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do here. What I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to offer a gift to people that might help them in a way that they might be able to relate to my unique experience. And so when I started looking at what I was doing as a gift, because the beautiful thing about giving gifts to the world is that now all of a sudden you don't have to worry about criticism, because it's like, if I offer you a gift, if I spend time like creating this thing and I say, hey, I got this for you, you can either say, thank you, that's very nice of you, I appreciate that. Or you can, kind of say, well, that's nice. This gift isn't really for me. You know what I mean? But I appreciate the thought, right? If I gave you a ballerina dress, you'd be like, that's a really nice thought, but I don't think that that's the gift for me, right? And you would kind of say that there's somebody out there who probably would appreciate that, and you would just redirect it to them, and that's where my mind started going. It's like, oh, I don't have to like compare myself to these greats. I could just offer gifts to people, and if it lands with some people and it impacts somebody, then great. And if not, then it's just because I didn't offer it to the right person, and I have to find the person who that gift might be better suited for. And that was the aha moment that changed my mind and really helped me disassociate from that comparison game and really focus more on the gift giving game. And that's formulated a lot of what I do in my daily practices is in a gist, is that if I can minimize more and more comparison and maximize more and more gift giving, that's my like daily focus. How can I remove comparison, increase gift giving, and focus on that?
I feel like focusing on all the gift giving and content and writing, it's actually helping you as a gift as much as other people.
100%. And that's one thing I've written about over the years is like I'm closing in on 10,000 hand uploaded quotes onto Move Me Quotes. So 10,000 since 2010. I've been uploading regularly and then organizing these things and making them easily accessible and kind of clear. And so one thing I've written is like, of all the people who have been to the website, who have been to Move Me Quotes, and all the people who have read these words that I've organized and tried to make accessible for people to read and help them improve their lives, and all the words that I've even written myself, nobody has had a bigger impact than me, right? Nobody has had more impact from that than me, is what I'm trying to say. Right. And that's another part of the inner work thing. And one of the things I try to encourage people to do with my daily writing is do the work themselves, right? Find ways I can give them inner work prompts or ask them questions or ask them things that they can start with their own daily practice. Like, how can you start your own quote website or start your own daily writing practice? Because no one's going to be more impacted than the things that you produce and work on than you yourself, for sure.
So how do you know, and maybe it doesn't even matter. I'm curious, how do you know, in my world, in my life, in most people's lives, I know when I'm successful and I know when I'm failing, and there's some metrics, let's say, that will show me that. And it can be much bigger and deeper than that, but just in general, when you're you're writing and then you're becoming very, I would think, very vulnerable by sharing it. Now you've said your way through that, past that block, as you put it, was understand it. What you just talked about with the giving gifts, which is really neat. I get that. That makes a lot of sense. But how do you know, hey, I've been impactful in a positive way? Is it just how you feel? Is it just things you hear from other people? You know, are there times when you're like, boy, that was a bad one. I really blew that one, or something like that. I'm curious how you're human, so you must look at those things. So
yeah, that's a great question. It's funny you mentioned that. I was writing about that today on my blog, and I was just thinking about that exact question, because, you know, the things that get measured are the things that get kind of focused on, right? Whatever you choose to measure is what's going to get your attention. It's what you're going to choose to manage with, you know, your time. And so the metrics a lot of people focus on are metrics that you might consider vanity metrics, right? In some situations. Now, certain metrics are important to be focused on, but the metrics that I try to focus on are the ones that are inside my control, right? And that's a super important distinction for people to make, because, like, if I look at metrics like, you know, number of likes or number of reshares or number of people who reacted to or number of comments or anything that has to do with an outside response, is something I try to focus less and less and less on. And the reason I do that is because who am I to say how much it's going to impact the world? I don't know. And to your point, there have been plenty of times where I've written something, felt like, you know, the deadline is here, I have to put something out, I'm going to bite the bullet on this one and just get it out there because I don't have a choice and I'm exhausted, and me working on this anymore and in this exhausted state is not going to help it. So I'm just going to hit publish, go to bed, and just, you know, call it a wash. And then sometimes it turns out that those are the ones that impact people the most. Like I have, like the more I've done this, the more I realize I have no idea what's going to impact other people. No clue. I have no clue. Right. And I can get like a little bit of a bearing as I continue to, hear responses. And if I get feedback and people reply to the email or they comment, and I get a little bit of a bearing on, the questions I get asked. And that definitely guides me. Like some of the outside coming in stuff is helps guide the process, but it's not what leads me to produce the work that I want to produce and write about, right? The things that I want to write about and the things that are most important to me at the time, or the things I'm feeling most at the time, is what's going to lead to my best work. And that's what I've realized. There's definitely a frame of thought, especially in the writing world, where it's like, okay, find your audience, figure out what they want to hear, and then say that. And it's like, I'm kind of like in a different world. Like the world I'm in is, I'm going to write about what's important for me. I'm going to dig deep and figure out what that message is, because there's a whole depth to us that a lot of us aren't even conscious of. And that's what inner work kind of leads to. It's like an unlocking of the unconscious, thought processes and things you've learned through a lifetime of experience, and just unpackaging that and offering it. And so being able to do that and being able to look inward and offer those packaged resources, my frame of thought is it's just like there's an ocean of insight here, there's also an ocean of people out there. And so rather than find my niche and then write something for them, it's like, I'm going to write about my thing, put it out there, figure out who's interested in hearing that, and then just kind of like focus in on those people who appreciate maybe the message or like receiving that type of gift. And that's really the metric I focus on is, if I had to summarize it, it would be streaks is like one of the most important things I focus on. It's, did I show up or not? Right. Mm. And it's, did I do the work? Did I offer something? Did I put something out onto the table? Just like the gym, right? I mean, there's, you could definitely measure the weights that you're lifting, the reps and the set counts and all that stuff. And that's important to track progress, to make sure you're moving in the right direction, of course. But more important than that is whether or not you're showing up consistently, right? Because all of that is going to prove to be irrelevant if you're not showing up in a consistent manner, because there's no consistent gains without consistent showing up. So that's where I'm at with my measurements. I measure the days I show up. I measure, the actions that I've taken. And if I'm looking to grow, I don't measure growth by, again, the vanity things like the number of followers. I can't control that. The number of people who react or respond to my stuff, I can't control that. What I measure is, am I taking more actions, right? Am I taking more actions that are going to lead me to maybe, reaching a better audience, or am I trying new tactics, or am I maybe going into a new media source or whatever it might be? So I try to focus on as much as I can inside my control to answer your question, and less that's outside my control.
Great. And I mean, just in our short time together, I've just made a few things that have stood out. And I don't care whether we're talking about business, sales, martial arts, teaching, softball, whatever, or what we're actually talking about here, you're writing. There's three things you've said that I think I just don't want to gloss over, because anyone listening, these are the three things so far that I would say you said that everyone can benefit from. Show up. Don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to yourself, and that's your measurement, right? And then focus on what you can control, not the things you can't control. And those are things I absolutely live by, Matthew, and they lead to success in my life, no matter what I'm talking about. And the fact that they just came up organically in our conversation in the first 10 or 15 minutes is worth repeating. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I live by the same things. They have completely formulated who I am as a person and how I look at things on a daily basis.
Is
so
that
I appreciate you mentioning it.
Is that a martial arts thing, or am I overthinking that?
So I would say martial arts taught me a lot, and it forms the foundation of my character for sure, undoubtedly. The things that martial art teaches the best are four things, really. And the four things that martial art teaches really, really well, at least in the style that I practice and with the instructors that I have, it teaches self-discipline really well, because, discipline is the precursor to self-discipline, right? And if you learn how to, if you learn how to, quiet the ego and the comfort-seeking ego and the desire to do the easy path, if you learn how to quiet that and you start callousing your mind, essentially, and a great way to do that is by disciplining yourself and putting yourself under the wing of a really intimidating and strong and inspiring at the same time martial art instructor. Slowly you kind of learn to start doing that on your own, right? Just like when you're a kid, a lot of the things that you're learning from your parents, are kind of like outside in first, and then later on they become inside out second. And it's just a byproduct of the living situations once you understand delayed gratification and stuff like that. So self-discipline is one, and that's definitely a great thing martial art teaches. Focus is another one. It taught me definitely how to focus and how to stand still and not move my eyes and keep my body perfectly composed if I need to. Because of, obviously, if you don't do that, then you might get punched in the face. So there's a very real consequence to not being focused in a martial art environment. Confidence is another really big one. And confidence, as I've come to define it, is success remembered, right? And so if you can, level up in belts, and you can achieve tips, and you can do hard things, and you can perform in front of classes, that forms a foundation that you can reference, right? Because the next time you have to go into a sparring match, you can reference all the other times you sparred and think to yourself, okay, I could probably do that again, right? Because I've done it before. And that kind of continues to build, hopefully in a progressive way. And hopefully you're not thrown into the fire and like you have to go against somebody really hard, because then that has a negative consequence. And if you are unsuccessful on that first attempt, then that's the only frame of reference you have. And then you think to yourself, I can't do that anymore. I don't want to do that, because your confidence got smashed because it wasn't appropriately progressed. So focus, discipline, and then respect is the other one I was going to mention. So focus, discipline, respect, and confidence. Those are the four. So respect, of course, because you're taught to look in the eyes, you're taught to bow and show respect. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Do things on the first time. So those are the four things martial arts does really, really good with. And those are the things that I would highlight as far as what I've learned from that. The one that that I'll comment on is the comparison. One thing in martial arts, and there's definitely many ways that you can take martial arts and many ways that you can do martial arts. But, for the competitor, for the tournament competitor, there's definitely a level of comparison in there where that healthy competition is encouraged between you and other people so that you can, level your martial arts up. It's an external motivation for you to train harder so you can build yourself up in that regard. So there's definitely a healthy competition emphasis in the competition school. But one thing we try to talk about for the people who aren't really competitors is, don't compare the performance of your skill at your rank with other ranks, other people of the similar rank. Try to compare it to who you were as a white belt or a previous belt and just look at it that way. So there's those two sides of it. That's, I guess, what I wanted to comment on when you mentioned that.
You guys successfully segued to where I wanted to take this. I wanted to pivot towards the martial arts a little. Two things I think every child should have, that I did with my kids by dumb luck, is they took these tiny tumbling gymnastics classes when they were really little. And then from about ages 6 to their early teens, they practiced the martial art of Judo because it was just local. And then when they got into being teens, this is before they even played sports. Then when they got into being teens, the place moved, they're playing sports, and they didn't have the time. But the transformation I saw, I wouldn't have pinpointed the four things, but as you were talking, the discipline, the focus, the confidence, and respect, they still carry with them today. And I think that's important. Well, for any young woman. I'm a little biased because I have 2 daughters. Has helped forge them. What types of transformations do you see with the students? Do you see it that clearly with them, or do they have to be there a certain amount of time before you see it? Or give us a few
It's
stories.
different. Yeah, I will. It's different for every person, as you know, as a teacher. Some people are more receptive to the messages than others. There's definitely what I might consider 3 categories of students, right? And I'll just say, because you're a teacher, you might consider them A, B, and C students. Okay, this is just a general just compartmentalization for the sake of the conversation. So you got your A students, right? So your A students are the ones who come in, They're already focused, and they're already pretty well focused, disciplined, respectful, and confident. They already have those things kind of like innately, and they stand out in the class as leaders because they have a pretty good grip of those things at the start. And so those are the ones who kind of you see transformations in, so long as you lean into that and allow them to become the leaders of the class. If you lean into it and allow them to shine as the leaders, then that can lead to a tremendous transformation. I was the byproduct of that because I spent so much time going in there, and I, again, not to toot my own horn here, but I had a pretty good grip of focus, discipline, confidence, and respect. And maybe it was from my upbringing, just because of all the, the things I did as a kid. And I had amazing parents who helped kind of instill those things in me as I was young. But when you have that kind of initial grasp of the characteristics, the techniques come so much easier to you, right? And once you have a foundation in your mentality with like that, teach me anything. I'm a sponge. I'm ready. I don't need any kind of like focusing tactics or whatever. Like, you put me into something I'm curious about, I'll block out any distraction, and I'm zoned in, and I'm going to soak in everything you have to say right away, because that's the nature of my personality. And so when you have A students like that, if you want them to have a strong transformation, from my experience, it's about giving them a lot of highlighting that, and letting the other kids know this is what, not saying like, you need to be more like Matt, right? Or you need to be more like Billy. It's never that. It's always praising publicly the behaviors that you want to see more of from others, and then reprimanding privately in a one-on-one setting the behaviors or actions that they could do to improve themselves. So what we're talking about for the A students is like, we're having them come up, and it's like, did you guys hear how loud, Danny was? You guys got to be as loud as Danny. Oh man, did you guys see how fast Paul was? You guys got to stand up and be fast like Paul. And then you start highlighting these characteristics, and then it's like, okay, let me have, Barbara, why don't you line the class up for us today? Because that would challenge them, right? So you have to give them a little extra because they started a little ahead. So that's the first category of student, right? The second category I'm going to go to the C students next, and I'll end on the B. So the C students at the other end of the spectrum are the ones who have a little bit of a harder time of it. They're the ones who aren't really focused, disciplined, respectful, or confident. And it might be one of those more than the others. And they're the ones that need a little extra attention. Now, in most of the situations that they experience in life, they get told that they're bad kids or bad students, or they kind of get this this reputation, or that's not the word I'm looking for, but they kind of get this stigma is what I'm looking for. This stigma that they're like bad kids because they're always getting yelled at, and they're always getting reprimanded, and they're always getting attention, and they're always getting, whatever. And because of that, it leads them to a belief inside themselves that that's who they are. It's an identity. And all of a sudden they start acting like that because that's who they see themselves as. But when you put them when you put them under the wing of the right instruction and the right culture and the right environment, I have seen so many kids and adults really who have been told their whole lives that they were doing things wrong, that they weren't smart enough, they weren't good enough, whatever, who have come into martial arts. And because we have a really good focus on building them up through positive praise and like doing the quiet reprimands or the private reprimands, we have seen like tremendous differences in responses, because there's so many times when parents and teachers have great intentions, but the execution, it's not in alignment with the C students. And the C students are ones who need the most help. I'm sure you've heard the expression, the student who kind of acts with the most hate, or is the one that you kind of feel is giving you the hardest time. They're the ones who need the most love, because they have had the hardest time of it. They are the most confused. They are the ones who are like, you think you're confused trying to figure out like how to help these kids get onto better paths. They're confused. They don't know how to get onto a better path, and they're lashing out because they're frustrated way more than you are. You know what I mean? It's temporary for you. For them, it's 24/7. And so you have to figure out how to navigate that landscape. Now, martial arts, because of the culture, allows you to take these C students and allows you to kind of put them into a situation where, they're earning levels on their belt. building confidence. They're saying yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. And they're seeing other kids do it. So they're doing it more, because a lot of times C students act out to get attention, right? Because that's, one of the fundamental motivations for kids is attention seeking. If they can't get the attention from being an A student, then they're going to lash out and cause chaos, because some kids would prefer to get negative attention than no attention. That's the triangle, right? Good attention, bad attention, no attention. Some kids prefer the bad attention more than the no attention. So they'll act out to get it, right? And so you have to figure out what's triggering that. Find a way to approach it with compassion, have a conversation with them, and figure out like what you can do to put them in better situations. And for that, okay, I'll give you like our 3-step formula for working with challenging students. This is what I teach my instructors. So when working with a challenging student, there's 3 things that I want them to remember. Number 1, and this is the most important, is build rapport, right? If you're working with a challenging student, you have to build a relationship up with them in some way. And whether that's joking or like, creating inside jokes, or just having, kind of side conversation with them, or just seeing how their day was, or, kind of just like stepping up to them in class and letting them know they're doing a good job. You have to build rapport with the kids that are giving you the hardest time. If you don't have rapport, they will not listen to you and they'll keep acting out. So the relationship is everything. So you have to invest into that if you want to have an easier time later when you ask them to do something for you. Hey, make sure you don't hit the other kids in line, because that's not a respectful thing to do, right? And so you have that conversation with them when you need to, but then they'll listen to you because you have the rapport built. So number 1 is build rapport. Number 2, set clear expectations, right? You got to let them know exactly what they got to do to get the praise from you. How can I get praise from you? Some kids, aren't going to be able to do what the A kids can do. But if you go up to little Billy, who's spinning around in circles and can't stand still because he's got a lot of energy, then go up to him and just let him know, hey, I just want you to try your best to, I want, to try, like 5-second standstills throughout the day today. If I see you get a 5-second standstill, I'll give you a high five, or I'll let you know you did really great. Like, you have to customize it to some kids' situations. So, build rapport, set clear expectations. And the last one, this is key, absolutely key. Catch them doing something right. You have to catch them doing something right, and you have to let them know you caught them as soon as possible. So as soon as you walk up to that kid and you say, hey, I'm going to try to catch you, with a 5-second standstill, you got to keep your eye on him, and you got to keep teaching class, but you got to have a special kind of side focus waiting for that moment. And then as soon as that moment comes, it's like, stop everything. Guys, I just want to acknowledge this guy over here. He just stood still for 5 seconds, didn't move a muscle. I want you guys to do that too. All of a sudden he's like, whoa, right? That worked. And so that's like an example. There's many other teaching formulas that I have for my instructors, but that's one example of a 3-step formula that the instructors try to utilize on a regular basis so that we can help those C students get onto a better path so that they can be built up, not torn down, because they're just always torn down. And that's what leads to the challenges. So if we can get that right, and we can do that right, it's unbelievable how well martial arts can help kids who have always been told that they're, bad, not listening, disrespectful, this kind of thing. Because not only do we have these formulas in place, but we're also doing high energy dynamic things, which matches their natural energy anyway. And so it's a really great fit. It's like a puzzle piece. So you got the A students, the B students, and then you got the A students and the C students, and then to finish off on the B students. These are the ones I would say are the hardest. And the reason I would say the B students are the hardest is because they don't stand out as much as A students, and they definitely don't stand out as much as C students. They kind of blend in, right? The B students are the ones that blend in with the crowd. They're not really, they don't have any attributes that make them like specifically notable, but they're good listeners. They're decently coordinated. They're respectful. They're not like disrespectful, but they're not like outgoingly respectful or whatever. And they're not the most confident, but they're also not like that unconfident. They just blend in. And the reason that they're the hardest is because of that, because they blend in. And because they blend in, they don't capture your attention. And because they don't capture your attention, they might think that they're not good enough, because what are you doing? You're spending all your time challenging the A students and trying to catch the C students doing something right, where the B students are just there doing what they're supposed to do, you know? And so the B students are the ones who you have to go out of your way to notice and to find something for them that they can focus on. You have to make sure that you're noticing the ones that go unnoticed. And a good example of that, and this is another 3 rule that we have that I teach the instructors, is every single class you teach, and this comes from one of the people who mentored me in the martial arts education room. The 3x3 rule is every single class, you try to make eye contact with every kid 3 times. You try to say their name 3 times, and you try to make appropriate kind of body contact 3 times, whether that's a high five, fist bump, contact on a shield or a mitt. But it's 3x3, 3 eye contact, 3 name, 3 appropriate contact. So that way they know that you saw them. And that just reminds you as the teacher to notice everybody and not get too caught up on the A's and B's. And so that, I guess, is how I would summarize how martial arts has impacted people's lives. I know I didn't give you any specific stories, but okay. Again, that's just a gist about like how it does impact them based on, what I've seen over the years.
Yeah, I mean, teaching's teaching. I mean, those are a lot of the same formulas we use in the classroom, praise publicly, reprimand privately, and try to find the rapport. And there's no secret bullet,
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, they're also the same things we do in the business world, right? Because we're always teaching and coaching and whatever terminology you want to use. It's all the same in so many ways, right? With new employees in general, just you're trying to do the same thing because we're all trying to get. It's funny, and I know we're getting close to time here, Paul, but it's funny. You talk about it in the school system, or you talk about it from an obvious coaching situation like martial arts or softball or basketball, and the coach is doing something, and the goal is to help the person get better, right? So not so that they're the best student ever or they're the best basketball player ever, but they're a better version of who they can become, right? They're a better Paul Richmond or Matthew Hogan or Matt Huffnagel, right? That's you're trying to make these people better. You don't have some sort of ulterior motive so that, Paul, you benefit some way. I don't believe that's the case. But when we do it in the business world, there's some weird kind of, well, you're trying to manipulate people so that you can use them. And I've never understood that because it couldn't be more wrong. I'm not saying there aren't business people who do that, just like I'm saying there aren't coaches and teachers who abuse kids too. We all know all those things are true.
I did not like the instructor from the Karate Kid, the original one, right?
There you go.
But I think at the end of the day, and I know why. I'm not naive to know why, but I think in the business world, those people who are good business people who succeed long term in anything, whether it's martial arts or teaching, traditional teaching in a school system, or as a business person. I just spent the first 6 hours of my day teaching and working with employees of mine. And the goal is to get them to be excellent employees, but not just so I can wring every dollar out of them. You know what I mean? It's not what it's about. And the number of people that I've seen go on to better things, the number of people I've said, it's time for you to go and move on to a better part of your life. Right. And the joy that gives me as a teacher and a coach in the business world, I think is very similar in a lot of ways. And I just thought I'd throw it out there because, I know it can be looked at in another way. And I just don't. I don't think that's what most business people are trying to do. I think they're really trying to help other people because I know they've been helped just like I have.
Facts. And to comment on that real quick, another blessing in my life that I have to mention because you just said that is that I was super fortunate to come up in a martial arts school where the martial art master, the person who opened the school, was also a really great business person. And because he had both of those things, I was able to get a full-time job out of college as a martial art instructor. Who do you know gives people the opportunity to do full-time martial arts instruction?
True.
Right? All the martial arts schools that open up are, one sensei or teacher, and then he has volunteers, right? It's just that teacher, he kind of has a little, school, whatever size, a little fishbowl school. And then he has students come in. he has volunteers, and that's it. That's the whole operation.
Okay.
But I was fortunate to come up in a situation where, the master of the school that I teach at was also equally business minded, because he knew that not only is it about providing the service of martial art instructor, character development, and all these kind of things, but it's also about finding ways that you can grow that influence and give other people opportunity, right? So like, I was given this beautiful opportunity to make a life teaching martial arts, never had to go to a job interview, never had to do another. I mean, I've done part-time jobs, but I've never had another full-time job. I've done this full-time my entire professional life. I'm coming up on 20 years of teaching, and I'm 33. I'm 33 and I'm coming up on 20 years of teaching in martial arts, which it's unbelievable, right? And so I've been fortunate in that regard. And the mindset that, I had to remind myself, because I did, when I first started coming up, I did have that kind of same natural reaction where it's like, no, we shouldn't be charging people money for this kind of stuff. And this is something we should just be doing out of the goodness of our heart and this kind of thing. And there's definitely an altruism to that. But had my instructor not been able to create a situation where he was able to, provide enough income to sustain a lifestyle for me, I would be elsewhere. I would be somewhere else doing something else, trying to make a living for myself. Right. So the model that he tries to follow is it's like, okay, if we're going to charge this rate, how can we provide this much service? You know what I mean? That's his mentality. It's like, this is our rate. This is the service we're trying to provide. How can we provide that level of service so that it, justifies the cost, of course.
Yeah.
And then with that, how can we then open this up into the lives of other people? Because the last point I'll make is, it's like, if I didn't have that martial arts school open up around the corner from my house, I don't know where the hell I would be. No clue. I do not know who I would be as a person, because this has been a part of my life for so long. And so the idea in the back of my mind is like, well, damn, we should probably figure out a way to get a martial arts school onto more people's corners, right? So that they have the chance to experience what I had that completely shaped my life into the person I am today. And so that's, to your point about business. It's like, it took me a long time to learn this lesson, but the value, so long as the value supersedes the cost, then you have a great business. And so long as you have a great business, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to make that a bigger thing, or expand and franchise and open other locations so that other people have the beautiful opportunity that you had.
Perfectly said.
Hey, so I want you to take 2-3 minutes as we wrap up to talk about your book, The Art of Forward. But I'm also going to call this podcast Matthew Hogan Part 1, because we've already realized we need a second one. But I don't want to end before. I mean, we could go all day. I don't want to end before you talk about your book, The Art of Forward, real quick.
Yeah, it's actually a guide. And so I started,
Yes.
as I told you guys earlier in our chat today, I've been writing every day since January 1st, 2020. So you can imagine how many freaking, pieces of writing that I have laying around. I, and doing my best to organize them and to put them into a concise kind of like, clear-minded guide. I started by trying to create it into a book, and that turned into like a 400-page ebook. And it's like, no one's going to read a 400-page ebook. Definitely cut that off the list. And so what I did was I took there was 12 chapters inside this book. And so I took each of the chapters, and what I decided to do is I'm just going to chop each chapter up into a guide that's hyper-focused on answering one specific question. And it'll be a niche product for people who are looking for very specific types of answers. And it's a composition of 30 meditations that are 1 page long. One of my mottos, and one of the things that I'm trying to do in my world, as far as writing goes, what makes me stand out is I'm trying to do inner work for the busy person, right? I'm trying to make inner work more accessible. And because a lot of people who think inner work, they think like, they think hours and hours of therapy. They think, 10-day retreats, they think, really intense, days of work. And so what I'm trying to do is send 1 minute inner work prompts and reflections and musings every day, 1 minute, so that you can read and think about something inside. I'm trying to capture quotes and resources from other people who have said really great things that I think would be worth your time. share that. And then I'm creating these guides, right? And so if you would like to go a little deeper into these things that I only write 1 minute about every day, then this guide can help you answer this question. And so part one is the one that I released. The whole point of the guide is that direction in life is more important than speed. And so that is the whole focus of the 30 meditations. It's all about finding and calibrating your internal compass so that you know you're moving in the right direction in your life and you don't end up in a destination later on that you're then filled with regret about because you didn't calibrate your compass earlier on and you didn't figure out like, oh, I didn't look inward and realize I'm heading down a path that I actually don't want to head down. I would actually prefer to go down this path and change my mind about this thing now, because if I don't change it now, it's only going to get harder to change my mind later. And so it's 30 meditations, 1 page each, with an action step at the end of each 1-page meditation that prompts like some inner work and some writing, 15 minutes, per day. And then there's an illustration. This is one of the pieces that I really love about this guide, is that there's 30 illustrations that go with the meditation. So you can actually download them and you can make them the screensaver of your phone and you can make them the screensaver of your desktop. They're pre-formatted to fit both portrait and landscape. And you can use them as reminders so that you can, put them on and you can like open your phone up and be like, oh yeah, that's right. This is the thing I'm thinking about today. And so there are triggers to just help you remember what it is that you were doing. And so that's the piece I put out. I'm super proud of it. You can find it at the bottom of my Move Me Quotes website. So if you go to movemequotes.com, scroll down, it's in the footer of any page you go to. So that's where you'll find it. And I'm super proud of it. And yeah, that's the whole point, is to just help people find, their direction in life so that they can live a life with less regret.
Matt, you're doing great stuff. Where else can everybody find you at?
The only other place I would say is the matthogan.blog. And that's my daily blog that I put my 1-minute articles out on. And so those are the 2 places I spend my most time, matthogan.blog, and then movemequotes.com. Those are the 2 places that I spend all my internet time on. If you're gonna find me on a social media site, it's gonna be Twitter, as Paul knows. But I don't spend any time really on any other social sites besides Twitter. So that's it.
Wow. Any closing thoughts, Matt?
No, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think that we've got would be nice to get together again. I'm fascinated by the martial arts piece of it and how that impacts your life in other areas. And I'd like to get into that more at another time. And the whole purpose, Matthew, of Paul and I doing this from the get-go was to have people on to talk about things that would inspire them to make good decisions to lead a better life. And that's a variety of things, whether it's, whatever happens to be. But I think there's a lot of common factors, common denominators in good decision making. And the things that you've discussed and we've talked about today are really, no matter who you are, I think they're really important. You don't have to go do martial arts 6 days a week, I think, in order to benefit from a lot of these things. Although there's probably a tremendous amount of benefit you would get from doing martial arts 6 days a week that we haven't had time to get into, that I really do want to get into. So that's my closing thought.
Yeah, and everybody always says you basically become you become like the people you spend the most time with, and that's why we up this on season 3 to weekly, because the more inspiring, motivated people that tell their journey, not only the ups but the downs and the struggles, I think it empowers people to level up to their best life too. So Matthew, it's been great, and this is part 1.
I'm super excited to come back. I really enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate you guys doing what you do. This is something that I've spent literally my entire adult life focused on, is how I can find ways to help inspire people to live better lives. And there's so many avenues that we could go down with this conversation, and I would be happy to entertain any of them.
We'll get a few, and like I asked earlier, a lot of it's just to help you live your own best life too, right? It's so empowering when you're just throwing stuff out there to help other people. It actually helps yourself. So absolutely. At that note, we'll stop. Matthew, thanks again. Matt, thanks for coming on as well and being my crazy co-host. And until next time,
Thanks so much. See you later.
you got it.